It's been 5 years since the explosion that shook New York and shattered the heart of the most feared man in the city. They say Lorenzo Moretti has ice in his veins, a Mafia don who doesn't bleed, who doesn't feel. But every single day, rain or shine, he stands before a marble headstone at St. Jude's Cemetery, weeping for a daughter who was taken too soon. He thinks he buried his heart in that ground. He has no idea that the woman watching him from the shadows, the one hiding behind the veil of a stranger, is the very ghost he mourns. This is the story of a father's grief, a daughter's survival, and the deadly secrets that kept them apart. The sky over New Jersey was a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of a storm, matching the mood that hung perpetually over Lorenzo Moretti. At 52, Lorenzo was a man carved from granite and regret. He wore his tailored Brioni suits like armor, and his reputation as the head of the Moretti crime family was enough to silence rooms just by walking into them. But here, inside the iron gates of St. Jude's Cemetery, he was just a man, a broken, hollow man. He stood before the pristine, white marble angel that guarded the grave. The inscription was simple, yet it weighed on him like a physical blow every time he read it. Sophia Moretti, 1999-2019. Beloved daughter. Too beautiful for this world, Lorenzo fell to his knees, ignoring the damp earth soaking into his trousers. He placed a single white lily on the cold stone. His hands, usually steady enough to pull a trigger without a tremor, shook violently. "I'm sorry, Tesoro," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. It should have been me. Every day, I wish it had been me." 50 yards away, concealed by the thick trunk of an ancient oak tree and the hood of a nondescript grey raincoat, a young woman watched him. Her name, according to her driver's license and the lease on her small apartment in Weehawken, was Eleanor Rossi. But her heart hammered a different rhythm against her ribs. It beat for the name carved on that stone, Sophia. She gripped the rough bark of the tree, her knuckles white. Seeing him like this never got easier. For the first year, she had hated him. She had blamed him for the car bomb that had thrown her body into the Hudson River and turned her life into ash. She had blamed him for the business that made her a target. But over time, the hate had cooled into a dull, aching pity. "He looks older," she murmured to herself. "He is older, kid. Grief ages you faster than whiskey," a gravelly voice said behind her. Elena didn't jump. She turned to see Giovanni, the man who was officially her uncle, unofficially her savior, and currently her only link to a past that was legally dead. Giovanni leaned on a cane, his face a roadmap of scars earned in service to the Moretti family, before he vanished along with her. "You're getting too close, Sophia," Giovanni warned, using her real name only because no one else was around. "Marco has eyes everywhere. If he sees you—" "He won't," she snapped, turning back to watch her father. Lorenzo was wiping his eyes with a silk handkerchief. "Marco thinks I'm fish food. He thinks you died of a heart attack in Florida. We're ghosts, Gio. Ghosts don't run flower shops 3 miles from the family crypt," Giovanni grumbled. "You're playing with fire. If Lorenzo finds out you're alive, he'll tear the city apart to get to you. And if Marco finds out, he'll finish the job he started 5 years ago." Elena watched her father stand up. He kissed his fingers and pressed them to the cold marble angel's cheek. The tenderness of the gesture made her chest tighten. This was the man who ordered hits on rivals, who ran the docks with an iron fist. Yet he was the same man who used to read her bedtime stories and chase away the monsters under her bed. Now he was the monster, and she was the one hiding. "He's suffering, Gio," she said softly. "That's his penance," Giovanni replied, his voice hard. He brought the war to his doorstep. You were just the collateral damage. Never forget that. She didn't forget. The memory was seared into her mind. The click of the ignition, the heat, the world turning upside down, and then the freezing water. Giovanni had been the driver. He had sensed something wrong a split second before the blast, shoving her out the door as the car exploded. He had dragged her broken body to the riverbank, staged their deaths, and hidden her away. Lorenzo turned and began the long walk back to his black SUV, flanked by 2 new bodyguards who looked too young and too nervous. He walked right past the tree where Elena stood. She held her breath, pressing herself flat against the wood. He was so close she could smell his cologne, sandalwood and tobacco, a scent that instantly transported her back to her childhood. For a second, Lorenzo paused. He stopped on the gravel path, tilting his head, as if listening to a frequency only he could hear. He looked toward the tree. Elena's heart stopped. Did he see me? Lorenzo's eyes, dark and haunted, swept over the shadows. He frowned, a look of confusion passing over his face. Then, one of the bodyguards whispered something, and the moment broke. Lorenzo nodded, got into the car, and the convoy drove away, leaving nothing but the smell of exhaust and the silence of the dead. That was too close, Giovanni hissed, grabbing her arm. We're leaving. Now. Eleanor let him pull her away, but she kept looking back at the grave. The white lily stood out starkly against the grey stone. I can't keep doing this, Gio, she said, as they got into her battered Honda Civic, watching him die slowly. It's been 5 years. Maybe he's changed. Giovanni started the car, his expression grim. Men like Lorenzo Moretti don't change, Elena. They just reload. He thinks you're dead, and that keeps you safe. You reveal yourself, and you become a pawn again. Is that what you want? To be used as leverage against him by every 2-bit gangster in New York? No, she whispered, then stay dead. They drove in silence back to Petal and Thorn, the flower shop Elena had opened 2 years ago. It was her sanctuary, a place of life and colour in a world that felt increasingly grey. She threw herself into her work, arranging hydrangeas and roses, trying to drown out the image of her father's weeping face. But fate, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humour. Just as she was flipping the sign to closed, the bell above the door chimed. Eleanor looked up, a polite smile plastered on her face. I'm so sorry. We're actually just closing. The words died in her throat. Standing in the doorway, shaking rain off a black umbrella, was a man she knew all too well. Not her father, but someone just as dangerous. It was Luca Rossi, the son of the rival Don, the family her father had been at war with for decades, the family everyone assumed had planted the bomb. He looked different, too. Less boyish, harder. He was wearing a dark suit, and his eyes scanned the shop with a predatory sharpness. I just need something quick, Luca said, his voice smooth. For a grave. Eleanor froze, her back to him. If she turned around, would he recognize her? It had been 5 years. She had dyed her hair from raven black to a honey blonde. She wore glasses now. But Luca had known her since they were kids, before the war between their families made friendship impossible. Miss? Luca stepped closer. Elena grabbed a pre-made bouquet of white lilies, the same kind her father bought. She kept her head down, hair falling over her face, and turned slightly, extending the flowers. Take them, she whispered, her voice altered, rougher. On the house. Just, please go. Luca paused. He looked at her hand, trembling slightly as she held the flowers. Then he looked at her face, obscured by the dim lighting, and her hair. Do I know you? he asked, stepping closer. The air in the shop grew thick with tension. No, Elena said, backing away. I have a headache. Please. Luca studied her for a long, agonizing second. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out $100 bill, and placed it on the counter. Keep the change, he said. He took the flowers and turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. You remind me of someone. Someone who died a long time ago. The door chimed as he left. Elena collapsed against the counter, gasping for air. Her world was shrinking. Her father was visiting her grave. The rival heir was visiting her shop. The walls of her secret life were closing in, and she had a terrifying feeling that the dead were about to rise. Elena didn't move until she heard the distant roar of Luca's engine fading into the traffic. She was hyperventilating, the $100 bill crumpled in her hand. Luca Rossi. Why here? Why now? Giovanni burst through the back room door, his eyes wide with alarm. I heard the front bell. Who was that? Luca, she choked out. Luca Rossi. He came for lilies, for a grave. Giovanni's face, usually impassive, flushed with sudden fear. The Rossi kid. What did he say? Did he recognize you? He said I reminded him of someone, Elena whispered, running a trembling hand through her blonde hair. He was buying flowers for a grave, Gio. Whose? Not mine, that's too morbid, even for him. It doesn't matter whose, Giovanni said, grabbing his coat. This is a sign, Sophia. They're circling. The minute a Rossi or a Moretti sets foot near you, you pack up. We disappear. Elena pushed past him, heading toward the small kitchen area. No, I'm done running. I need to know why he was here. What if he's involved? What if he knows something about the bomb? The police and your father concluded the Rossi family put the car bomb in your sedan, Giovanni stated flatly. It was retaliation for the seizure of the Bayonne docks. It was a clear-cut hit. But was it? Elena leaned against the cool tile counter, her eyes vacant, lost in the inferno of the past. The day started with a fight. Sophia, then 20, had been fiercely independent, constantly butting heads with her father, Lorenzo, over the family business. She was a pre-med student at Columbia, determined to escape the shadow of the Moretti name. I'm going to intern at St. Vincent's this summer, Papa. Not managing accounts at your shipping company, she'd argued, facing him in his opulent penthouse office overlooking Manhattan. Lorenzo, perpetually calm and commanding, merely smiled, a predatory gleam in his dark eyes. You will intern where I tell you, Bambina. The Moretti name protects you, but it also commands service. You need to learn how the world really works. It runs on power, not antibiotics. It runs on fear, Papa, and I want no part of it, she had shouted. She rarely raised her voice, but the constant pressure was suffocating. You are a Moretti, he'd said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You don't get a choice. That night, she decided to leave. Not forever, just for a few weeks to clear her head. She packed a small bag, scribbled a furious note to her father, and called Giovanni, her personal driver and confidant since she was a child. Gio, I need a ride to the bus terminal. Quietly, now, she instructed over the phone. Giovanni arrived in her sleek, black Mercedes sedan, a vehicle that screamed Moretti, despite her efforts to be discreet. She was already inside the car when Giovanni paused. He was usually meticulous, but tonight he seemed jumpy, checking his mirrors repeatedly. Everything all right, Gio? She asked, buckling her seatbelt. Just a feeling, Miss Sophia. A bad one, he mumbled, his hand hovering over the ignition. Then a flicker of movement caught her eye. She looked out the passenger window, and on the street corner, half hidden by a scaffolding, she saw a familiar figure. Marco Vitale, her father's ambitious, hot-headed underboss. He wasn't watching the car, he was watching the driver, Giovanni. And his expression wasn't one of protection, it was one of grim expectation. Before she could process the chill that ran down her spine, Giovanni roared, "Get out! Now!" He didn't wait. He shoved the car door open with his foot and hurled Sophia out onto the curb an instant before turning the key. The sound was not a simple bang. It was a terrifying, all-consuming whoomp. A blinding flash of orange and red, followed by a concussive blast that felt like a punch to the chest. The car instantly became a fireball. Debris, shattered glass, and thick, oily smoke filled the humid evening air. Sophia's head slammed against the pavement. Her last coherent thought was Giovanni's sacrifice. Then, the silence of shock was broken by sirens and the sound of running footsteps. She woke up in the water. The explosion had thrown her body off the curb, down a small embankment, and into the murky, frigid Hudson River. She was disoriented, half drowned, and felt a searing pain shoot through her right leg. Giovanni was there, his face black with soot, his body bleeding from a dozen cuts. He dragged her out onto a deserted stretch of dock under the cover of a massive container ship registered to a shell company. "They'll be looking for bodies, Sophia, not survivors," he said, his voice ragged. Marco was watching. It wasn't the Rosses. It was someone internal. They want your father destabilized, and you were the easiest way to do it. "Marco, was it him?" she gasped, clutching her side. Giovanni shook his head. "He's a soldier, not a don. But he was acting on orders. Someone inside wanted your father to think the Rosses did it, to start a war. A distraction while they seize control. We have to disappear. Tonight. Now." He had found a severely burned, unrecognizable body in the wreckage, a homeless man who often slept in the alley nearby. He dressed the corpse in Sophia's clothes and necklace, planted some evidence, and called the anonymous tip line with a vague description of a black sedan speeding away, pointing the finger vaguely at the rival territory across the river. He used his old connections, calling in favors to get 2 fake identities, 2 plane tickets, and a safe house in Arizona. Sophia Moretti was officially deceased. Elena Rossi was born. But before they left, Sophia, wrapped in bandages and pain, had one demand. "I have to know if he's grieving, Gio. If he mourns me because he loved me, or because I was his asset." Giovanni took her, hidden under a blanket in the back of a rented pickup truck, past the police tape and the news vans, just in time to see Lorenzo Moretti standing over the wreckage. He wasn't shouting or raging. He was just standing there, unmoving, letting the rain wash the soot off his face, looking utterly and completely broken. Seeing his raw, unguarded devastation was a knife twist. He did love her. But the truth of her existence, the truth that Marco was likely involved, and that the blast was an internal coup, was too dangerous to reveal. It would throw the Moretti family into a civil war, which would undoubtedly end with her dead for real. So, they drove away. Giovanni kept her alive, but in doing so, he cemented the lie that had become her coffin. The memory ended, leaving Elena cold and shaky. "Marco," she whispered to Giovanni. "Marco Vitale. He was the one watching. He's the one who framed the Rosses. He's probably the one now running things while my father is stuck in a loop of grief." Giovanni lit a cigarette, his face etched with concern. "That's why you stay away, Sophia. Marco is ruthless. He's already tried to kill you once. If he knows you're alive, he'll try twice, and he'll get us both." "But Luca Rossi," Elena insisted, pacing her tiny kitchen. "If the Rossis didn't do it, they think we killed one of theirs to frame them." Maybe that's who he was buying the lilies for. Maybe Luca has his own grief, and he's not seeking revenge. He's seeking answers. A flicker of an idea, reckless and dangerous, ignited in her eyes. I need to know what Luca knows, Gio. If the Rossis are innocent, they're being used just like my father. I could reach out to him. Discreetly. Are you insane? Giovanni slammed his hand on the table. You will not go near that boy. The only thing that will come from talking to Luca Rossi is a bullet in the head and a war that consumes the entire tri-state area. No, the war is already here, Gio, she countered, her voice dangerously calm. It's been here for 5 years, slowly consuming my father and everyone around him. If I can prove that Marco, or whoever he's working for, was the real attacker, it exposes the threat inside the Moretti family, and maybe, just maybe, it saves my father before Marco finishes him off. Elena picked up the $100 bill Luca had left. She unfolded it, smoothing out the wrinkles. He's grieving, Gio, just like my father. Grief makes people reckless, and reckless people talk. She knew Luca often went to the same high-end Italian coffee shop, Caffè Milano, in Little Italy. It was neutral territory, a place where rival family members occasionally ran into each other under a tacit, temporary truce. She had kept tabs on the family, reading the obituaries and news reports. Luca, now the heir apparent after his own father's declining health, was often seen there. I'm going to follow him, she declared, grabbing her car keys, not as Sophia, as Elena Rossi, the flower girl. Giovanni sighed, running a hand over his tired face. He knew he couldn't stop her. The stubbornness was pure Moretti. Fine, he conceded, pulling out a heavy antique .38 revolver from his coat pocket. But you will take this, and you will wear a wire, and I will be parked within 100 feet of you the entire time. If that boy so much as breathes wrong, I pull you out of there, understood? Understood, Elena said, taking the cold, familiar weight of the weapon. She left Giovanni with the flower shop and drove toward the city, toward a confrontation that would either resurrect her or bury her forever. The drive from Weehawken into Manhattan was nerve-wracking. Every black car she saw looked like an assassin's vehicle. Elena parked her beat-up Civic 2 blocks from Caffè Milano and got out, adjusting the nearly invisible earpiece that linked her to Giovanni. Remember the plan, Sophia. Approach him like you're interested in his business, not his past. Gauge his reaction. Giovanni's voice crackled softly in her ear. Keep it professional, I know, she replied. She smoothed down the simple, professional black dress she wore, a stark contrast to the jeans and t-shirts she usually wore at the shop. Her blonde hair was pulled back tight, giving her face a sharper, unfamiliar contour. Caffè Milano was a hive of quiet power, filled with men in dark suits conducting hushed business over espresso. Luca Rossi was exactly where she expected him to be, sitting alone in a corner booth, nursing a macchiato, his formidable presence creating a bubble of space around him. He looked tense, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the porcelain cup. Taking a deep breath, Elena walked over, affecting a slight limp to disguise her old stride, a subtle reminder of the broken leg she sustained in the blast. "Mr. Rossi?" she asked, her voice calm and carefully modulated. Luca looked up, his eyes, dark like her father's, but with a surprising trace of sadness, narrowed slightly. "Do I know you?" "No, not exactly," Elena said, sliding into the opposite side of the booth without waiting for an invitation. "My name is Elena Rossi. I own Petal and Thorn, the flower shop you visited yesterday. I apologize for my behavior. I was having a migraine." Luca leaned back, assessing her with a cold, professional gaze. "That's quite a drive for an apology, Miss Rossi. My schedule is tight." "I know it is," she said, leaning in slightly. "You bought white lilies yesterday. I noticed. They're a significant purchase, and I noticed you looked stressed. I thought you might need an ear or maybe a better florist." She paused, letting the silence hang. She needed him to talk about the grave. Luca took a slow sip of his coffee. "I'm not looking for an ear, miss. Or a florist. I was visiting the grave of my sister's fiancé, Dante Santini. He was killed 5 years ago in a car bombing on the docks. We believe it was the Moretti family." Elena felt a cold wave wash over her. Dante Santini. She remembered the name. A young, ambitious man rumored to be the heir to the Santini crime family, close associates of the Rossis. He had been killed the same night as her staged death. "I'm sorry for your loss," Elena said, genuinely. "But why do you believe the Morettis were responsible?" Luca's jaw tightened. "Because he was meeting a confidential informant about a major dock seizure that afternoon, a seizure engineered by Lorenzo Moretti. The meeting was set for 9 p.m. The bomb went off at 9:05 p.m. The message was clear." "But I heard the police investigation was inconclusive," Elena pressed. "The police investigation was purchased," Luca scoffed, leaning forward now, his composure cracking slightly. The name Dante Santini clearly meant a great deal to him. "My family knows the truth. My father is dying of cancer. But before he goes, he wants one thing: justice for Dante. He made me promise. An eye for an eye." "And what if your eye is focused on the wrong target?" Elena asked, her heart pounding. "What are you implying, Miss Rossi?" Luca's eyes suddenly turned sharp, dangerous. "I'm implying that I work near the docks," Elena lied smoothly. "I hear things, rumors, and the rumors I've heard over the years don't point solely at the Morettis. They point at someone much closer to both families, someone who benefits from a war between two dying dons." She watched his reaction closely. Luca's hand stopped drumming on the cup. His pupils dilated almost imperceptibly. "Who?" he demanded, the word a low growl. "That's where the professional part comes in," Elena said, leaning back, regaining control. "I'm a simple florist, Mr. Rossi, but I also have an affinity for complicated arrangements. I am offering you information, real information, about the Moretti organization's internal workings, for a price, a steep one." Luca's suspicion was palpable. Why? Why would a florist be risking her life to sell intel on the Morettis to their enemies? "Grief," Elena said, using the truth mixed with the lie. "My family was ruined by the Morettis' ambition. They took everything. I want to see them fall. But I don't want an indiscriminate war that kills innocent people. If I can help you target the real cancer inside the Moretti family, you get your justice, and the city gets peace." She met his gaze, holding it steadily, letting her own hidden grief fuel her conviction. "Name your price," Luca finally said, the promise of vengeance overriding his caution. "I don't want money," Elena said, delivering her masterstroke. "I want a face-to-face meeting with your sister, Isabella." She was Dante's fiancée. She must know more about his business that night than anyone. She's the key to figuring out who Dante was meeting, who the informant was, and who really planted the bomb. Luca stared at her, utterly perplexed. "Isabella? She's been a recluse since Dante died. She blames the whole world. Why would you want to talk to her?" "Because," Elena said, forcing herself to maintain a level voice, "grief connects people. She needs to talk to someone who understands the complexity of losing someone to this life. And I need to know what Dante was doing. A grieving woman will trust another grieving woman more than she'd trust a transaction. Bring me to Isabella, and the information about the Moretti internal coup is yours." Luca considered her, a million calculations running through his mind. The offer was absurd. A florist wanting to speak to his heartbroken sister in exchange for intel on the Moretti internal structure. It reeked of a trap, but the mention of a coup hit too close to his own lingering suspicions. "I'll think about it, Miss Rossi," he said, rising from the booth. "Don't contact me. I will contact you if I decide you're not a federal agent or a maniac." He dropped a napkin on the table, a phone number scrawled on it, and walked away. Elena sat back, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through her. She had taken the bait, and Luca, driven by his dead friend's memory and his father's dying wish, had nibbled. She had put herself in the direct line of fire, but she had a target, Isabella Rossi, the woman who might hold the last piece of the puzzle. "Gio, did you hear all that?" she whispered into the mic. "I heard, Sophia, and you just went from hiding in a coffin to dancing on its lid. Dante Santini was the target, not you. This changes everything. But meeting Isabella, that is too dangerous. It's the only way, Gio. I need to know what happened that night. I need to know if my father is truly innocent of ordering that hit. And I need to know who Marco is working for." Elena stood up, taking one last look around. She had successfully turned herself into a weapon of information. Now, she just had to wait for Luca Rossi to decide if he was willing to point her at his enemies. 2 days later, a black Lincoln Town car idled outside Petal and Thorn. There was no driver opening the door. The tinted window simply rolled down, revealing Luca Rossi's stoic profile. "Get in," he said. Elena locked the shop, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted her coat. She had a wire taped to her chest, hidden beneath layers of fabric, though Giovanni had warned her the signal wouldn't penetrate the thick walls of the Rossi estate. She was effectively on her own. The drive to the Rossi mansion in Alpine, New Jersey, was conducted in oppressive silence. The estate, once a symbol of the family's vibrant power, now looked like a mausoleum. The hedges were overgrown, the iron gates rusted, and the windows draped in heavy velvet, shutting out the sun. "Isabella doesn't see anyone," Luca said, as they walked through the echoing marble foyer. "If you upset her, our deal is off, and you won't leave this property." "I understand," Elena replied, gripping her purse. They entered a solarium at the back of the house. The air was stiflingly hot, filled with the scent of wilting gardenias. Sitting in a wicker chair, draped in black lace, despite it being 5 years since Dante's death, was Isabella Rossi. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been shattered and glued back together wrong. Her eyes were hollow, staring at a framed photograph of a smiling young man, Dante. "Isabella," Luca said softly. "This is Elena. She wanted to speak with you about Dante." Isabella turned slowly, her gaze sharp and unwelcoming. "A florist? What does a florist know about my Dante?" Elena stepped forward, ignoring the urge to flee. "I know that grief is a heavy stone to carry alone, Miss Rossi. I know that sometimes the official story doesn't make sense, and I know that Dante didn't die by accident." Isabella let out a bitter, jagged laugh. "Accident? He was murdered by Lorenzo Moretti. Everyone knows that." "My sources say otherwise," Elena said, taking a chair opposite her. "My sources say Dante was meeting someone that night who wasn't a Moretti. Someone he trusted. Someone who betrayed him." Isabella's hands clenched the armrests. "He was meeting a contact. He wouldn't tell me who. He called him Il Lupo, the wolf. He said this wolf was going to give us the keys to the city, that he had a way to end the war before it began. The wolf. Elena's mind raced. It was a nickname she hadn't heard before, but it fit the predatory nature of the betrayal. Did he leave anything behind? Elena asked gently. Anything that might identify this wolf? Isabella hesitated, looking at Luca, who gave a subtle nod. She reached into the folds of her dress and pulled out a heavy, gold Zippo lighter. It was battered, scorched on one side, likely from the blast that killed him. He took this from the contact during a meeting the week before, Isabella whispered, running her thumb over the metal. He said it was a joke, a trophy. He said, "If anything happens to me, Bella, look at the wolf's teeth." Elena leaned in, her breath catching. She took the lighter, her fingers brushing the cold metal. It was an antique piece, custom-made. On the bottom, etched into the gold, was a small, intricate engraving. Not a wolf, but a family crest. A crest she recognized from her childhood. It was a shield with a chevron and 3 daggers. The Vitale family crest. The room spun. Marco Vitale, her father's underboss. The man who had smiled at her confirmation. The man who stood by her father's side at every meeting. Marco wasn't just a soldier. He was a relic of an older, rival bloodline that had been absorbed into the Moretti family decades ago. The wolf's teeth, Elena murmured, realizing the double meaning. The daggers. Do you know whose crest that is? Luca demanded, stepping closer, sensing the shift in her demeanor. Elena looked up, her eyes wide with a terrifying clarity. It belongs to Marco Vitale, my father's right hand. Vitale? Luca frowned. He's Moretti's lapdog. Why would he kill Dante? Because, Elena said, standing up, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Marco didn't just want a war. He wanted a vacuum. He killed Dante to enrage the Rossis. He tried to kill the Moretti daughter, to break Lorenzo. He played both of you. He's been running the city from the shadows for 5 years, while your families bleed each other dry. Isabella let out a sob, clutching the photo of Dante. He used us. He used my Dante as a pawn. Luca's face hardened into a mask of pure fury. If this is true, if Vitale is the wolf, then Lorenzo Moretti is innocent of the hit on Dante. He is, Elena said firmly. Lorenzo is a lot of things, but he doesn't hide behind car bombs and designated scapegoats. Marco did this. And if you want justice for Dante, you don't need to fight the Morettis. You need to help me stop Marco. Luca stared at her, the realization dawning on him. The years of hatred, the wasted blood, all engineered by a third party. How? Luca asked. Tomorrow is the anniversary of the explosion, Elena said, her mind working fast. Marco knows my father visits the cemetery. He knows Lorenzo is weak, isolated. If I were Marco, and I wanted to finally take the throne, tomorrow would be the day I finish the job. You think he's going to hit Lorenzo? I think he's going to try, Elena said, moving toward the door. And we have to be there to stop it. I need you to trust me, Luca. One last time. Luca looked at his sister, then back at Elena. He pulled a gun from his holster and checked the chamber. I'm not doing this for you, Florist. I'm doing it for Dante. I'll have my men ready. The morning of the anniversary was grey and weeping, a curtain of drizzle hanging over St. Jude's Cemetery. It was the kind of weather that muted colours and muffled sounds, turning the world into a ghost story. Lorenzo Moretti stood alone at the grave. He had dismissed his bodyguards to the perimeter, needing this moment of privacy. He looked gaunt, his skin papery and pale. 5 years of grief had hollowed him out, leaving a shell that simply went through the motions of power. 5 years, Tesoro. he whispered to the stone angel. And it still feels like yesterday. Hidden in the tree line, 300 yards away, Elena watched through binoculars. Giovanni was beside her, checking the load on a sniper rifle he had dug out of storage. "He's exposed," Giovanni grumbled. "Those guards are too far back. Marco engineered this. He cut the security detail." "Where is Luca?" Elena hissed into her earpiece. "North gate, holding position. He's waiting for your signal," Giovanni replied. Suddenly, a black SUV rolled slowly up the gravel path, stopping just 10 yards from Lorenzo. The door opened, and Marco Vitale stepped out. He was dressed in a sharp Italian suit, holding a large black umbrella. He walked toward Lorenzo, with the confident swagger of a man who owned the ground he walked on. Elena adjusted the focus on her binoculars. She saw Marco place a hand on Lorenzo's shoulder. It looked like a gesture of comfort, but the body language was wrong. Marco was standing too tall, too dominant. Lorenzo was slumped. "Giovanni, audio," Elena commanded. Giovanni adjusted the directional microphone he had set up. The sound of rain crackled in her earpiece, followed by Marco's voice, clear and cold. "Time to move on, Don Lorenzo. The commission is getting impatient. They say you're weak. They say you're living in the past." "Let them talk, Marco." Lorenzo's voice was weary. "I built this empire. I can burn it down." "That's just it, Lorenzo," Marco said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "You didn't build it. You inherited it. And you wasted it crying over a girl who was too soft for this world anyway." Elena froze. Lorenzo stiffened, slowly turning to face his underboss. "What did you say?" "I said she was soft," Marco sneered, dropping the pretense. He pulled out a suppressed pistol, leveling it at Lorenzo's chest. "I did you a favor, old man. I took her out of the equation so you could focus. But you didn't focus. You crumbled. And now I have to clean up the mess. The Rossis will get the blame for this, too. A tragic drive-by at a cemetery. Fitting." Lorenzo didn't flinch. He just looked at Marco with profound sadness. "It was you, all this time. My brother." "Business, Lorenzo. Just business." Marco's finger tightened on the trigger. "Now!" Elena screamed. Crack! Giovanni's rifle barked. The shot was perfect. It struck the pistol in Marco's hand, shattering the weapon and sending it spinning into the wet grass. Marco howled in pain, clutching his mangled hand. "Secure the target!" Giovanni shouted into the radio. From the north gate, Luca Rossi's men swarmed in, engines roaring as 3 SUVs boxed in Marco's vehicle. But Marco wasn't alone. From the tree line behind the grave, 6 of Marco's loyal mercenaries emerged, opening fire on Luca's approaching cars. The cemetery erupted into chaos. Bullets chipped pieces off the marble angels. Lorenzo, unarmed and in shock, dove behind his daughter's headstone for cover. "Papa!" Elena screamed. She broke cover, sprinting across the open grass towards the grave. She had no weapon, only the desperate need to reach him. "Sophia, no!" Giovanni yelled, firing cover shots to clear her path. Elena ran through the mud, her lungs burning. She saw Marco scrambling for a dropped submachine gun near one of his fallen men. He raised it, aiming not at the Rossi cars, but directly at the tombstone where Lorenzo was hiding. "No!" Elena threw herself forward, sliding across the wet grass, and tackled her father, just as Marco unleashed a hail of bullets. The stone angel above them shattered, raining marble dust and shards down on them. Lorenzo gasped, looking up at the person who had just saved his life. He saw a woman with blonde hair, glasses, and a face streaked with mud. But then, their eyes locked. Time stopped. The gunfire, the shouting, the rain, it all faded into a dull roar. Lorenzo stared into eyes he had known since the day she was born, eyes he had closed in his nightmares for 5 years. "Sophia?" he whispered, his voice broken, unbelieving. Elena, Sophia, ripped the glasses off her face. Tears streamed down her cheeks, mixing with the rain. "I'm here, Papa! I'm here!" Lorenzo reached out a trembling hand to touch her face, as if testing if she was a spirit. "You're dead. I buried you." "No," she sobbed, gripping his hand. "Giovanni saved me. We had to hide. Marco, he tried to kill me." A roar of rage, primal and terrifying, erupted from Lorenzo Moretti. The shock vanished, replaced by the cold, volcanic fury of a father who had just found out his grief was a lie and his daughter was a target. He looked over the tombstone. Marco was reloading, screaming orders at his men. Lorenzo grabbed a pistol from the holster of a dead mercenary lying nearby. He stood up, fully exposed, ignoring the bullets whizzing past him. He didn't look like a broken old man anymore. He looked like the devil himself. "Marco!" Lorenzo bellowed, his voice booming over the gunfire. Marco froze, looking up to see his Don standing tall, with his dead daughter by his side. The color drained from Marco's face. He saw the ghost. "It's over," Marco whispered. Before Marco could raise his weapon, Lorenzo fired. Once, twice, 3 times. Each shot was deliberate. Chest, chest, head. Marco Vitale collapsed backward onto the wet grass, his eyes staring blankly at the grey sky. The remaining mercenaries, seeing their leader dead and the Rossi forces closing in, dropped their weapons and raised their hands. Silence returned to the cemetery, heavier than before. Luca Rossi walked slowly toward the grave, his gun lowered. He looked at the body of Marco, then at Lorenzo, and finally at Elena. Lorenzo dropped the gun. He turned to Sophia, his knees finally giving out. He fell to the ground, sobbing uncontrollably. Sophia fell with him, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. "I'm sorry, Papa. I'm so sorry," she cried. Lorenzo held her so tight she could barely breathe, rocking her back and forth in the rain. "You're alive. My baby is alive." Luca watched them, a strange expression on his face. He signaled his men to stand down. He had come for revenge, but he had found something else. He had found the truth. And looking at the reunion of the father and daughter, he realized the war was over. But as the adrenaline faded, the reality of the situation set in. Sophia Moretti was alive. The balance of power in New York had just been upended. And while Marco was dead, the secrets Elena had kept for 5 years were about to come to light. Lorenzo pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. "Giovanni? He's safe," she said. "He's been watching over me." Lorenzo looked up at the hill where Giovanni stood, leaning on his cane. The 2 men locked eyes. Lorenzo nodded, a silent message of infinite gratitude. "Come home," Lorenzo said, his voice ragged. "We're going home." "I can't just go back, Papa," Sophia said, wiping her eyes. "Everything has changed." "Then we change with it," Lorenzo said, standing up and pulling her to her feet. He looked at Luca Rossi. "Thank you," Lorenzo said, the words tasting strange in his mouth. Luca nodded stiffly. "We're square, Moretti. For now." As Lorenzo led his daughter toward his car, shielded by the Rossi men, Sophia looked back at the grave one last time. The stone angel was headless, destroyed by Marco's bullets. The symbol of her death was gone. Sophia Moretti had risen. But Eleanor Rossi was the one who had learned how to survive, and she wasn't sure which woman was walking out of that cemetery. The resurrection of Sophia Moretti didn't just make the news, it stopped the city cold. The headlines screamed about the Mafia princess rising from the grave, and the paparazzi swarmed the gates of the Moretti estate like locusts. Inside the mansion was a fortress. Lorenzo had doubled the guard, pulling in men from as far as Chicago and Miami. He was taking no chances. But for Sophia, the safety felt suffocating. Her old room had been preserved exactly as she left it 5 years ago. Posters of bands she no longer listened to, textbooks for classes she'd never finished. It was a museum to a dead girl. "You need to eat, Tesoro," Lorenzo said, entering the room with a silver tray. He looked 10 years younger than he had in the cemetery, the color back in his cheeks, but his eyes were filled with a frantic, possessive anxiety. "I'm not hungry, Papa," Sophia said, standing by the window, watching the guards patrol the grounds. "I feel like a prisoner." "You are safe," Lorenzo corrected gently. "Marco is dead, but his associates, the people he was working for, we don't know who else is out there. Until we clean house, you stay here." "I survived 5 years without you, Papa," she reminded him, turning to face him. "I ran a business. I paid taxes. I lived a life. You can't just put me back in this box." Lorenzo set the tray down, his expression hardening. "You survived because you were lucky, because Giovanni is a good soldier. But you are a Moretti. And now that the world knows you're alive, every enemy I have will try to use you to get to me. Again." He left the room, locking the door from the outside. The click echoed like a gunshot. Sophia sank onto the bed. She had her father back, but she had lost her freedom. Elena Rossi was disappearing, swallowed whole by the legend of Sophia Moretti. Later that night, a tap on her balcony window startled her. She pulled back the heavy drapes to see a figure crouching in the rain. It was Luca. She unlatched the window, letting him in. He was soaking wet, dressed in black tactical gear. "You have terrible security for a fortress," Luca remarked, shaking off the water. "My father thinks the threat is outside the walls," Sophia said, crossing her arms. "Why are you here, Luca? To collect your debt?" "To warn you," Luca said, his face grim. "My father. He passed away an hour ago. The cancer finally took him." "I'm sorry," Sophia said softly. The war between their families had cost both of them so much. "Don't be. He died knowing the truth about Dante." "That gave him peace," Luca said. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "But with him gone, I'm the head of the Rossi family now, and I just got a call from the commission. They've called an emergency sit-down for tomorrow night. They want to discuss the Vitale incident. They're summoning Lorenzo, and they're summoning me." "The commission," Sophia mused, "the governing body of the 5 families. They're angry Marco is dead." "They're angry that the war is over," Luca corrected. "Conflict is profitable for the commission. They sell the weapons, they mediate the disputes for a fee. Marco was their golden boy. He was supposed to wipe out the old guard, my father and yours, and streamline the operations under their control. Lorenzo killing Marco messed up their quarterly earnings." "So they're going to kill my father," Sophia realized, the blood draining from her face. "They're going to try," Luca said. "It's a trap, Sophia. They've called the meeting at the Onyx Club. Neutral ground, no weapons allowed. But the chairman, Vincente, the Bishop Falco, he never plays by the rules." "Vincente Falco," Sophia repeated. The name sparked a memory. "The man who owns the construction contracts for the new harbor project." "The same," Luca nodded. "Marco was promising him the docks. With Marco dead, Falco has to take them by force. He'll execute Lorenzo at the table for unsanctioned violence against a made man." "I have to tell him." "He won't listen," Luca said. "He thinks he's invincible right now because he has you back. He's blinded by relief. If he walks into that room, he dies." Sophia looked at Luca, seeing the ally she never knew she needed. "Then we don't let him walk in alone. We walk in with him." "I can't bring you," Luca argued. It's a death sentence. I'm not asking for permission, Don Rossi, Sophia said, her eyes flashing with the steel of the woman who had lived as Eleanor. I'm the witness. I'm the one Marco confessed to in the cemetery. I heard him say he was working for the Commission. If I testify at the sit-down, I can turn the other families against Falco. I can expose the conspiracy. Luca studied her for a long moment. He saw the transformation. The fragile girl was gone. You really are your father's daughter, Luca murmured. A hint of a smile touched his lips. Fine, but we do it my way, and we bring Giovanni. The Onyx Club was a tomb of velvet and shadow. At the head of the massive mahogany table sat Vincente, the bishop, Falco, the chairman of the commission. Lorenzo sat to his right, Luca to his left. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cigars and impending violence. You've become a liability, Lorenzo, Falco said smoothly, polishing his wire-rimmed glasses. Killing Marco Vitale without sanction? Chaos is bad for business. Marco was a traitor, Lorenzo growled, his knuckles white on the armrests. He tried to kill my daughter. Marco is dead. You are here, Falco countered, his eyes dead and shark-like. He snapped his fingers. 4 massive enforcers emerged from the dark corners of the room, leveling silencers at the back of Lorenzo's head. The commission accepts your resignation, Don Moretti. Permanently. Lorenzo stiffened, realizing the trap had closed. He closed his eyes, accepting his fate. But before a trigger could be pulled, the heavy double doors groaned open. If he is a liability, a female voice rang out, cutting through the tension like a blade, then what is a chairman who sells out his own counsel for a government contract? Sophia Moretti stepped into the light. She wore a stark white suit, a blinding beacon in the gloom. Giovanni limped behind her, his hand resting on his cane, his eyes scanning for threats. Who is this? Falco demanded, standing up, his composure cracking. I am the ghost you failed to bury, Sophia said, walking straight to the table, ignoring the guns trained on her. She tossed the heavy gold lighter, the one with the Vitale crest, onto the mahogany surface. It spun, clattering to a halt in front of the Genovese Don. Marco didn't act alone, Sophia announced, her voice steady. He confessed before he died. He was promised the docks by you, Bishop. You needed a war between the Morettis and Rossis to devalue the land so you could buy it cheap for your federal construction deal. The room went deathly still. The other Dons turned their cold gazes toward Falco. Lies! Falco shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. She's hysterical. Kill them all. Don't bother, Luca said calmly. He placed his phone on the table. A recording played. Marco's voice, clear as day, implicating Falco in the Santini bombing and the plot to destroy the families. Vincente, the Genovese Don said softly, signaling his own bodyguards. You broke the code. Falco scrambled for the gun in his jacket, but he was too slow. Lorenzo moved with the speed of a younger man, flipping the heavy table to create a barricade. Chaos erupted. Luca's men, disguised as waitstaff, drew their weapons, neutralizing Falco's enforcers in seconds. Falco tried to flee toward the private exit, but he found his path blocked by Giovanni. The old soldier smiled grimly and simply closed the door, locking Falco in the hallway with the enforcers of the other 3 families. The screams that followed were short. Silence returned to the club. The threat was extinguished. Lorenzo stood, chest heaving, looking at his daughter. She wasn't the little girl he remembered, nor the victim in the grave. She was a queen who had just checkmated the board. It's over, Luca said, holstering his weapon. Sophia stepped forward, taking her father's trembling hand and placing it over Luca's. Not yet. From now on, Moretti and Rossi run the docks together. 50-50. No more wars. No more ghosts. Lorenzo looked at Luca, then at the fierce, brilliant woman standing between them. He saw the future. Agreed, Lorenzo whispered. They walked out into the cool New York night, the rain finally clearing to reveal the city lights. Sophia linked arms with her father and her ally. The glass cage was broken. The morning was over. Sophia Moretti had returned to life, and this time she was never looking back. And so, the grave at St. Jude's Cemetery sits empty, a monument to a past that no longer exists. Lorenzo Moretti learned that the strongest bonds aren't forged in blood, but in the fire of survival. He got his daughter back, not as the innocent girl he lost, but as the fierce woman she needed to become. The war is over, the secrets are buried, and for the first time in decades, the city sleeps in peace. If you enjoyed this story of heartbreak, betrayal, and the unbreakable bond between a father and daughter, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more stories like this. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new episode. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven your father if you were Sophia? Or would you have stayed hidden as Eleanor? I read every comment, and I want to know what you think. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.